Hi, I'm George Rogers, your host with the Choice Skills Show. Over the next several shows, we're going to be talking about the nature of happiness. You know, one of the most curious things in the world, and perhaps one of the most tragic really, is that a large percentage, a very large percentage, of the misery that we experience in this life is brought upon us by either ourselves or others who are in pursuit of happiness. In other words, in the very goal of seeking happiness, we bring misery upon ourselves or upon others. That is a very interesting and, I'd say troubling perception. But why is this? Well, let's come back. If you remember the quote of Benjamin Franklin, and this really is the root of all that we're talking about on this show, when he said that as the happiness or real good of man consists in right action, and right action cannot be produced without right opinion, it behooves us above all things in this world to take care that our opinions of things be according to the nature of things. Well, if you think about it, the strongest, most commonly held desire, the single thread that can be said to be the most common thing spread throughout all of human existence and all people who are alive today, is the desire to be happy, and in some cases to make others happy. In many cases, hopefully. But we all have such different ideas about what will make ourselves and others happy that we often do things that create exactly the opposite result. And that's because we fail to understand the nature of happiness. Now, I'd like to read to you from a letter that Benjamin Franklin wrote to a friend while he was a minister, or one of the first ambassadors of the United States in France. This is during the Revolutionary War. And he was over there meeting with the king and many of his ministers for the objective of getting them to side with America in the war against England. But while he was there, he developed a number of friendships and relationships that he maintained while he was there. And in one, he wrote a letter to a friend, and he had this to say. It's about a childhood experience of his, and it's very revealing and interesting and instructive. When I was a child of 7 years old, my friends on a holiday filled my pocket with coppers. I went directly to a shop where they sold toys for children, and being charmed with the sound of a whistle that I met by the way in the hands of another boy, I voluntarily offered and gave all my money for one. I then came home and went whistling all over the house, much pleased with my whistle, but disturbing all the family. My brothers and sisters and cousins, understanding the bargain I had made, told me I had given 4 times as much for that whistle as it was worth, put me in mind of the good things I might have bought with the rest of the money, and laughed at me so much for my folly that I cried with vexation, and the reflection gave me more chagrin than the whistle gave me pleasure. This, however, was afterwards of use to me, the impression continuing on my mind, so that often, when I was tempted to buy some unnecessary thing, I said to myself, don't give too much for the whistle, and I saved my money. As I grew up and came into the world and observed the actions of men, I thought I met with many, very many, who gave too much for the whistle. When I saw one too ambitious of court favor, sacrificing his time in attendance on levees, his repose, his liberty, his virtue, and perhaps his friends to attain it, I have said to myself, this man gives too much for his whistle. Now remember, he's in France. One of the things he has to do a lot of times is attend these levees, and so he's seeing these people come to participate in these levees. And basically, the levee is where people were invited to the court to meet with the king and his ministers and people of high importance, and these were scheduled on a regular basis. And for many people in France, this was a very big deal. and it was very much a matter of prestige. And so he said, when he saw people doing this and sacrificing their liberty, their virtue, and their friends sometimes to attain it, he thought they were paying too much for the whistle. When I saw another fond of popularity, constantly employing himself in political bustles, neglecting his own affairs and ruining them by that neglect, he pays indeed, I say, too much for his whistle. If I knew a miser, apparently misers existed long before Scrooge. And he says, if I knew a miser who gave up every kind of comfortable living, all the pleasure of doing good to others, all the esteem of his fellow citizens, and the joys of benevolent friendship for the sake of accumulating wealth, poor man, said I, you pay too much for your whistle. When I met with a man of pleasure, sacrificing every laudable improvement of the mind or of his fortune for mere corporal sensations and ruining his health in the pursuit, mistaken man, said I, you are providing pain for yourself instead of pleasure. You give too much for your whistle. I mean, how relevant is this? Just this last week, we have observed in the news the unfolding story at Penn State University and the man who abused his position there, and the misery that obviously has unfolded in his own life, in the lives of his victims, and obviously now in the lives of many other people who are being swept into this vacuum, or this vortex of turmoil that's been created by what's going on. And so, you know, these are not isolated situations. This situation's in the news. It's getting all the news attention. But you know, and I know, there are literally thousands and thousands of individuals the world over who are going through similar experiences at one level or another. And this is just one aspect of human endeavor. When I see one fond of appearance, or fine clothes, fine houses, fine furniture, fine equipages, all above his fortune, for which he contracts debts and ends his career in prison, alas, say I, he has paid very dear for his whistle. Now, we don't have debtor's prison these days, but we do have an awfully lot of people who are losing their houses and places of where they live. Many people are losing their jobs, and we see even governments struggling on the brink of failure. State governments, national governments, on the brink of bankruptcy and disastrous financial disaster for thousands, millions of people, all because they're paying too much for the whistles. Sometimes these are brought upon us by our own actions, of course, and some of them are brought upon us by the actions of others, and sometimes it's a combination. But we can observe today these experiences happening in the lives of people because they were seeking things that they thought would bring them pleasure, but which in fact have brought them pain. When I see